Today, I'm going to go into why I use certain words to explain each letter. And I want you to keep in mind that nobody taught me any of this. This is something that I remembered. And trying to put descriptions of letters into words that contain other letters is difficult. But trying to give that letter a kind of property or a meaning of its own is necessary if we want to explain them a little better. So in this video, I have these three symbols here. I'm sure you've noticed these ones before. This is basically because we read from the top of the page and from the left of the page. It's that. The three-line graph is the bottom, middle, and top that we write our letters and words on, at least on certain kinds of paper. And then the hashtag, which seems new, but has always been there. Basically, what I mean by that is as if every letter had this symbol behind it, just invisible, just so you can see that there are parts to it. There's three on the left, three on the right, or three on the left, three in the middle, and three on the right. So when you're doing that, sort of imagine where that would be on a three-line graph. So I'll go into each letter, and please be patient with me, because usually when I try to do this, I end up rushing because I feel like I got to keep somebody's attention, because we all know this day and age, keeping somebody's attention isn't the easiest. When, say, you're watching this on a YouTube video and anything that's in your phone at that moment can pop up and distract you. So one of the biggest parts of this is learning to focus yourself. Somebody asked me recently, how can this help anything? I get what you're saying. It makes a lot of sense, but why does that matter? And what most people aren't taking into consideration is that you're the operator behind this. Everything you've ever done, everything you'll ever do, of course, you're taking actions, but without explaining them in words, they'd just be going about doing things. So when we start talking, there is definitely a reason we use those symbols. And that's what I'm trying to dive deeper into. And sometimes by over elaborating on things, it will lose you. And that is definitely not my intention. My intention is more or less to bring people together to see that there's more to this world besides all the storylines and all the other things we've heard. So I don't mean to offend people when I say that we've got to get our minds out of history, because we're moving forward. We're not going back to history. We can't bring any of that with us. We can keep some of the traditions if they're, moral, and we can actually use some of the things they did back then now when we see the example being a good thing to do. But when we go, oh, those are our traditions, and wait a minute, those are harsh, those are destructive, let's keep doing them because that's what our ancestors did. Our ancestors would not want that. Think about it. If it was your children and you had passed on, but somehow you could still monitor what they're doing, and you see that they're following along with what you've done, and you go, oh, this is getting really out of hand, and maybe we weren't thinking deep enough. You wouldn't go, keep doing it because it's our tradition. That's the important part. But without going into too much more of a tangent, I'll start doing the letters, and I'll do them one at a time, and just try to be patient with me. And when I go to stop the camera, I do apologize if when I set it back up, if it's not perfectly aligned like this. But like I said, bear with me. I am trying, and this is all coming from my heart, to try to help people just have a more simple understanding of life instead of being so bombarded with everything. Okay? So let's dive into the alphabet again. So starting with not only the first letter, but the first vowel. A, I use the word activation or any form of the word act in order to explain A. Because any action, any active thing, when we're talking using letters that we speak, or when we're writing using letters that we write, this is more about the speaking. The writing came later. We made sounds before we decided to write them down and give them purpose. So A, just like when someone says, open your mouth and say, it's literally the first thing that opens your mouth without any obstruction in the way. No lips, no tongue, no teeth. All the consonants are movements in the mouth, the actions of the mouth, and the parts of it. All the vowels are basically what I consider the feminine version, the thing that nurtures the idea, because they're the curvature of your mouth going, oh. There's very little involvement with the tongue, except for a vibration coming from it. But when you have a consonant, it's lips, teeth, tongue, pressure. When I get to C, I'll show you what I mean by the kind of smallest version of a consonant, because it's got a little tiny bit of movement of pressure. But A, the first letter, as I go, I'll try to make sure I include the tense of them, like the once, tense, and twents, and what I mean, how those relate to each other. And it is movements of the mouth. What is the deeper meaning behind all that? There is so much that it can't be put into words. But if you apply it and see in context, that's also another thing you got to keep in mind. In context, we use words. We don't just go book, tree, train. We don't, it's not like that. There's story to it. What we do with words is tell stories or tell meanings about the things that we experience. So without that, there'd just be silence. And coming from that silence is this information in your head, and we've decided to relay that information a specific way. So A being the first thing, like I said, it's active because you're just going, ah. If you did this shape with your mouth, that's this shape. But if you just do that straight line, it's like something starting right in the middle of this 3-line graph, because like I said, as if this was behind everything, it's right in the center of it. So A is that symbol. And since it's a vowel, it doesn't necessarily have the shape that looks exactly like it. But A is almost the only letter that doesn't have the shape that represents it completely. Most of the other ones do completely represent the shape. But A does, in a way where you say, ah, you're just activating, and it's just a straight line in the center of where this would be. So that's A. And as we go further, I'll show you how this is 1, and when we get to 11, when we get to 21, I'll show you how those are just movements of that same shape. And if you haven't heard me say it before, 1 through 9 are what I consider once tense. 10 through 20 are what I consider tense tense. And then also starting from 20 and on is twents. Just, we'll get to those when I get there. So that's A. So now we'll go to B. So for B, if you aren't aware, other languages a lot of times didn't have vowels. So like I was saying, with A being more to the activation point, if you would put that on here, it would be right there in the center. Every letter represents from the center of it. Every letter. So B, if you were to write this on a 3-line graph, you'd notice that whether it's lowercase or capital, the line is on the left side. It would be over here. And those two swoops are indicating back to this point, because there's nothing here and nothing here. And we're talking about something standing up and being based, or basis, depending on if you're using something physical or something mental to explain. So B itself is the shape of your lips going, bending in, because you come back to the base where pressure comes to go boo and make that sound. So A being ah, back of the throat opening, B is the front of the mouth curving like this. And like I've said in other videos, B is the second letter, which happens between 1 and 3, which is the shape of a B. And when you pull them apart, that would be in the middle, the B or the 2. And over here we have a 3 and a 1, and 3 happens to be 2 C's, whether it's a whole big capital C or a lowercase c. But if you would turn that around, that's a C and a C. But the movement of C itself is pressure in the back of your mouth going k. So it's literally the unseen concept, or constitute itself a concept. So the reason I use that to explain it is because other than E, I, and Y, C makes the k sound. Only when it has an E, I, or Y does it make a s, an S sound. And the only other letter that helps it make a sound other than k or s is when you go ch, or CL, well, CH, CL, and CR, the only things that you use with a C. And to explain why would take a minute, so I'm not going to go into that. But C itself has that same thing as B, moving on into the third one. Because we just had A, B, and then the merger of these two is in here. That C is in there right now. We just don't think of it that way. D is coming from how C is this shape, If we spun that around with a line in the middle, that's obviously a capital D. If we had the lowercase c involved here as well, we'd have a lowercase d. So there's the lowercase, and there's what I consider the doorway letter, which you come around to D, because your tongue moves forward to the bottom of your teeth and then bends. If you go D, before you make that sound, you're bending your tongue a tiny bit, and it's coming along the curve of your mouth. D, the curve of your mouth, and the tongue moving to the bottom. It's the only letter that has opposite side capital and lowercase. The only letter, D. And it's come forth into the light because it's when your tongue moves. Like I was saying, how mother is the mouth and the curvature, the tongue, or the dong, not to sound immature, but the tongue, the dong, is what moves and causes action. Just like masculinity is associated with action and femininity is associated with nurturing. And then together you nurture an action, and that's the outcome. So that's C and D. So moving from that shape here, as you can see, if I just took this D off, you'd have a 3 turning like that. So the 3 turns to an E, and it comes through the doorway of D. That's why I say it that way. I can't obviously think of another way to say it that's more accurate with explaining the movement of coming from here around to here and then opening up to that shape. So the shape of the E also being the next vowel in line when there's no mouth movement or pressures other than the curvature. A being ah and E being eh is coming more like you're curving your lips a tiny bit more. I mean, when you really over enunciate, if you're just going ah, eh, ah, like you're not really concentrating or thinking about what your lips and mouth are doing. But E itself has that, instead of ah, it's eh. There's more of a strain to your mouth, and it's literally shaping your mouth more to get more of a straight line out of the middle. Eh. So that's why I say it's the center expression, as if it was coming out here in the capital symbol, but when we do that lowercase symbol, it's still on the lower line. Now, I don't want to lose you here, but between 1 and 9, E is the center letter. So as a vowel, we're moving up to the middle right here. But then when we go to a consonant, we've already moved up to the middle. So the consonant is literally the same shape as an E, except that we have F coming from this as the vowel holding its place, like nurturing that expression. And then E moves to F when that expression becomes form, force, or familiar. And the reason I say that is because in order to go, there's force. When you bring it back and make this symbol that a 6 is, and then think that F is also right here, just like a 6 is right here. The number's almost like the opposite shape. Not specifically, but almost like. So when you say F, you're moving your bottom lip in, which is, this E is not there anymore. You're not going eh. You're going eh, and coming back to it. So you have form by your lips are coming in, and it's centered in your mouth. So it's that idea of 6, you know, instead of your sex being your gender, your subject expressing your center, 6 is your subject identifying the center. So 6 is literally just like that, identifying the center, moving up with F. So when I say form, force, or familiar, that's like, oh, it's come back to me. I'm familiar with that. When I push, that's force. And then form is literally something that I'm familiar with, that thing that's physical. I'm familiar with that idea in my mind. That's familiar. Do you see how it's just trying to put into words the meanings of what letters and their symbols stand for and represent, which is not easy. But at the same time, think about it and you'll get it. So moving from the 6th letter F to the 7th letter G, while this is drying, I'll show you how from A to G, and then after H, we have this, and I'll just do the sounds. I'll get to the shapes of them once this dries. But A is ah, back of the throat. B is just curvature of your lips. C is pressure in the back of your throat. D is movement to the front of your lips. D. E is back here again, just a little more of a strain. Eh. F now incorporates the bottom lip. Eh. G moves back even more to the depth of your throat. And then H comes from there and pushes out. Do you see how that's like the octave? We go ah, b, k, d, e, f, d, h. Now it's out. Now when you identify something with I don't want to go too far into that. So now that this is dried up a little bit. Don't mind my goofy looking G, but I drew it that way so that you could see the letter F, which has that shape up here in the middle. Now that same spot we're actually coming from. We're going at 7, the next number or the next letter G. So just like F was in that center spot, and 6 is that shape coming back to it, now just open that up. And you have this, and the number 7 symbol is coming from the top and coming back down here. So it's literally right there in the center. So when I say generated, I'm saying that because in the back of your mouth, not necessarily much of your tongue in your mouth or much of your mouth itself are doing anything. It's back here. So that's why I say generate, because not only is the G on the compass the generative principle, but you're coming from back here. I mean, words like God make more sense when you think of before your mouth. Ga, to and from. Oh, so the word is ga, d. So OD is like saying identification is ID. OD is ongoing identification. Is it not? I mean, I'm trying to give it words and make it simple, but there's depth to it, and that involves you. So G, the generated or grouped letter, is literally just because it's g, or when you're hanging or putting the G on the end of a word, usually you group it or give it a category of some sort. It's always contextual, so try to keep that in mind always. And I know I say keep that in mind. There's a lot to keep in mind here because no one's taken the time to try to look at the letters and words the way I do. But it's not because I one day was like, all right, I'm going to start looking at letters and numbers. Like I remembered something almost primitive to humans. Information itself is a phenomenon. Deliberating, thinking about stuff, making decisions and choices, that's a phenomenon. Why do we do it? Because how else would we increase or move forward? It's the only thing we could do once we become conscious. And most people have the problem of not wanting to do something new. They want to do something comfortable. So without tangenting too much, that is the big point. We've got to come together and do something that we can actually see is beneficial to ourselves and to the environment. Because we're not going to do something that's just beneficial to something else and destroying ourselves. And we're also, well, I can't say we're also not going to because we do, but we shouldn't destroy ourselves while destroying the planet. We've got to find the balance, or not necessarily a balance. At this point, we've got to give it time to heal. With the letter H being the first letter of heal, that's a good way to move into H. So now we have the 8th letter, H. The 8, the number 8, is that symbol that's obviously right here. And we have a circle on the top and a circle on the bottom, saying that this circle and this circle meet in the middle. So we had F. Notice the movement, that F is on the left side of this bar, if we had a 3-line graph. G is in the center of that bar with a 3-line graph. And H has reached over to the other side of that bar. So that's why I say here. And it's literally when you go, you opened your mouth and really blew the instead of an A being that similar shape but closed, going The other one is and it's a very subtle thing to notice. But A making the sound and E making the sound are slightly different than I or because you already have a tiny bit of H with it. You go from to eh. It has more of that silent push to it with your breath. I, Those sounds have an H kind of involved with them. If you don't hear it, I'm sorry, but it's there. There's a little bit of breath in that. So H moving to the letter I, something isn't just here, you're actually identifying it. So if we were on that 3-line graph, the bottom line here is squared away on the bottom, the bottom line on the top, squared away on top, and we're right in the middle of it, identifying with it. So this being the last letter between 1 and 9, you have A activating, you have E expressing, and you have I completely identified. They're nurturing that idea. Now, just like F moved one from this idea and then up to that center line without the bottom exposed, now I, doing that same thing, has J connected to it, which is a hook over to this side coming up in the center. So you're saying what we've already gone through a cycle of, we're now completing because it's in the center. The J is in the center and pointing to the left. So all this stuff is now intense, or I say junction to the identity, but it's just easier to say intense, J. So that is this same shape, just turned sideways, coming from this idea over to here, straight up. It's happening intense right now. So then after J being the 10th letter, we're moving up figuratively and mentally to this middle line. Like I said, try to understand what I mean, that every symbol still has like an invisible hashtag behind it. But this indicates certain things, like all those letters, A is center, B is on the side, C is on that side, D comes from that side and comes around that side. E is still on the left, moving out. F is on the left, but moving up to the center. G is on the left, coming from the top around the left, but coming from the center, generating. And then H is finally filling that out here. Now, when you take that thing that's here and you identify it right in the center, that's identified, not just here. Ah, it's here. That thing, I am here. So then that already being there, if you just add that little hook, we're saying it's coming into this right now. Whatever stuff we're talking about, the J is identifying that intense. It moves it one further. That's the hardest one for me to explain in words because it's literally your jaw. You're out here in the world. This is intense with you right now, is it not? And you go, J. This thing is what causes that sound. You move your jaw. J, J, J. So the shape of your mouth going J is a J. Do you see it? If not, I don't know how else to explain it. That's the problem that I'm running into, is because people say, well, you got to take time to explain them a little deeper. And if I show them and make the sound and explain why it actually indicates that symbol, I can't think of much else to do besides say, think deeper about it and then apply it to people and see that it doesn't actually check out, because I assure you, it does. And when we get into deeper stuff that doesn't need letters and word breakdowns, we can actually speak from our hearts, be honest with each other, and a lot of progress will be made. So now I'll move into the tense category, moving up to K. So now moving from J to K, how we just had that hook from the center of this left side of the symbol up to the middle. Now we're doing back to this left side, but shooting out to the middle with a K. And the word that I use for that is kinetic, or like of its kind, actively active. And I say actively active because it's an 11, which is 2 1s or 2 A's. The same applies with every number of the letter, because it's a combination of 2 now. When we get up to the 20s, then it does the same thing, except it moves in the 10 spot to a B instead of a 1. So everything from K through S has a 1 in the 10 spot. Remember, that just means we've already gone through a cycle, as in the once tense is more intimate to whatever you're talking about or wherever the letter's being used. So don't get lost too much on that. K is, like I said, that shape there, just how A was in the center, K moves over. It's just 1 tense higher. Instead of being down here, we're over here, and we're moving out. So that's K. Now we'll go into L. The letter L, the 12th letter, is 1 tense higher than B. And like we did with A going from this shape to that shape, K is just like turning A that way. L is like saying the same idea with a B being on this side and having these symbols going back to that base, but we're using this invisible hashtag behind them to make more sense of the shape of the letters. It literally comes all the way back to the base. On L, we're still talking about this spot, but it's open to it, saying here, as it lay, right in front of you. And I've also used ling when I'm talking about something that isn't necessarily physical or about linguistics. So also active base, because instead of being just based at B, we're actively based at L. And when some languages, they refer to El as a God name, it's your tongue pointing to the roof of your mouth, or pointing to the top of your mouth, up here, coming from the man upstairs. La, la, the shape of an L. And I used to say on my first couple of videos, I said 3D. And what I meant by that is this idea of D being this to and from letter, H being right here, and then L being 4 more away from that. It's 3 Ds or 3 4s. So it'd be this one, this thing right here, and then not just this thing or this thing, but this thing. What's right in the very center of it? L. So that's what I mean when I say active base or 3D as it lie. I'd just rather say as it lie because we don't necessarily need to know all this in depth. It will make more sense as time goes on. I guarantee it. It's just if we don't care about each other, that's the final straw always. So now I'll move into M and get into the teens. Now the letter M comes into the teens. 12 was just this L saying as it lie. Now that same position where there's something happening right here in the middle. Something is actively conceiving or actively constant to itself. It's manifest. That's why I use manifest or actively constant to itself, because it's intense and it's what I am. That thing is the manifest. So the shape of your mouth, how B and A did this from A and that to K, and B does this from B to this at L. C does that same kind of thing down here in the back of your mouth, and if you just turned it the same way and put a line on both sides, that's an M. It's 1 tense higher, or 1 shift in shape tense. I mean, like I said, I'm trying to give this words, but if you see what I'm saying, maybe it'll make more sense to you. So M is also that shape of your lips. So K back here and down here. So that's M. Plus it's the first letter that comes into tense at 13. K is 11, which is elevating the expressed notion. AA, actively active, elevating the expressed notion. 11. And then 12 is too elevated. So B and L. So it's A active, K, elevated expressed notion. 11, actively active. 12, the idea of two, and then elevated. And then 13 is now we already have a concept. We've moved from activation in basis to conceiving, and we're intense at 13. See how that is? So hopefully that definition helps. And we'll move to N now. The 14th letter N. I say notion, now, or nature. And the reason I say that, not only if you apply it, you'll see that it makes sense, but I say that because it's the 14th letter. A is active in the 10 spot, so it's actively, and then D is dia, or to and from, the director or doorway. And whatever would be actively doing that is a notion happening right now when you don't see it. It's out in nature if you do see it, or just both of those is now. And when you say, it's right here, right now, with you making noise through the tongue vibrating on the roof of your mouth. But not as hard as a Z or not as tough as a T. It's just a different vibration to your tongue, and you're just doing So it's actively to and from 14, actively dia, or now, notion, or nature. And the shape itself is your tongue going in your mouth. So, and the lowercase would be this of your mouth, and your tongue going to the roof of your mouth. How D was this, and is this. Nah. I mean, same thing. I don't know how else to say it without looking ridiculous, but I'm putting myself out here for you. So that's N, and we'll move to O. The letter O will probably take about 20 seconds because the shape of it is a circle. And if we put that here, it would be right in the very dead center of a circle, and you would say ongoing. I mean, that's what I used to say it because it's the best thing to say, whatever this is right here. It's what's ongoing. It's around the circle. And then AE, which would be 15, the number it would be actively expressing or the active expression. So O is either active expression, actively expressing, or ongoing. The letter P, going after O, it's not just this whole thing circled. We're moving up some. So the reason I use the word placement, it's not just that thing that's here. It's more that specific thing. It's actively familiar, active form, or active force. When I say force, that would be the potential you can put out. Something that's not necessarily seen, but it's mentally understood. The piece would be its active form. The place would be its active familiar. Where it comes back to the familiar part, but it'd be active, so it's the place. And then, so like I say, place, piece, or potential. And when you make the sound, it's P. It's coming and pushing out. I mean, B does the same kind of thing from the lower side, B and P. I mean, it's a big difference, but it's very small, and you have to think about it to really notice it. When you do it, you go, oh, so what? But there's a reason that those letters are shaped that way, and that's the reason. So, next letter, Q. As an interesting little thing to say before we go to Q, how the letter 16P is the top lip. 6 is F, the lower lip. Both have a flat tongue. When you push, you go F and P. But at the same time, when you use the tongue in the middle and you add the identification of it, you have the word flip, which is at the bottom lip going in, your tongue going L, your mouth going eh, and then to the top of your mouth. P. It's literally a flip of your lips when you say the word flip. Did you know that? I just thought that would be interesting to show you. Words are more magical than you think. Just point it out to yourself. F, L, up here. Flips in your mouth. Pretty awesome, I think. So the letter Q is very unique in its own way because just like G was the back of your throat, now take that a tense higher instead of going G. You're coming from a circular shape of your mouth to go Q. It almost makes like a KW sound, but it's the Q because it's what's on Q down here. It's not K up here. It's not W up here with W or K. It's Q. So that shape indicates something on Q right here in front of you. Out of this circle, this little group right here, it's moving out here in front of you. It's on Q. It's right ahead. So the thing that's on Q is that circular shape indicating something coming up from its potential on Q, and then we move to the next letter. So hopefully that helps enough with Q because it's not used all that much, but when you use just the idea of being on Q, this thing that's actively generated or grouped, it'll help understand why it's used in words where it's used. So the next letter. The letter R has a lot you can say about it because by the shape of your mouth being 1/10 higher than H instead of H, it's R. And just by curving your mouth, doing that shape, more like a lowercase r, it's reference. I use the word reference. But then at the same time, it's what you are. It's who you are. The letter R in the middle of the word earth is the thing that's active here. It's the thing that you're referencing to. How we just went from, let me show you, how O is this, P is this. Now, from this, maybe you've never noticed that it goes like this, and it comes out here. What if you just added those two things together, this little slash of the Q and this little P? Then you get this. R. Because it's not just what's ongoing, it's the place, piece, or potential doing something. It's on Q, and now it's what you are or the reference. Do you see how that makes sense out of it? It's what's active here, 18. And that's also 6 plus 6 plus 6, which means R. Ooh, it's not all that big of a deal. It's just what's happening right now on Earth, where you are. It's who you are. It's what we are. But it's just a reference to that with that letter. Life is obviously so much more than the letters and the words. But do you see how they mean so much more than we think they do? Because we are much more than we think we are. And hopefully that shows from O to P to Q to R. And I've had a video before talking about it takes two to make a thing go right. But if you want me to explain that to you, it'll be more of a personal thing because it's movement and you've got to have an open heart to hear it. So I'll move on to the next letter. So the letter S, I use the word subject because not only is it something that you're making that, and you're kind of sliding the word out of your mouth, it's the shape of coming from the bottom around to the top. A T is more crisp, but an S is more S. I know it makes the same sound as a C, but there's a difference between the idea of what a concept and a subject are. And it's that much of a subtle difference between C and S, but it means a lot in certain places in context. So not only is S subject, you could say, since it's AI or 19, you could say actively identified. So it's not just what something is, it's actively identified. It's what something S, until you actually make it out, and then we move to the next letter. To me, the letter T is just simply understood by seeing the symbol. If you put it in this invisible hashtag, now you see that it's literally just right up the middle and aligned at the top. So I say 20 because that symbol applies to just something being added to the idea. A thing is a plus here, identified, notion, or nature generated and grouped. When I say notion, you could say, I just thought of a thing. Or you could say, what's that thing? Plus here, identified, nature generated and grouped. Thing. So T, you could say the word thing, but it just makes more sense to say 20. Or since it's the 20th letter, you could say based ongoing. So it's like a plus symbol. It's based ongoing plus 20. Now we're moving into the twents category. So since we had T and it's moved up to this top line, keep in mind that this top line is now what we've moved to. So if we're taking whatever this is here, you can almost visualize everything in the twents category, everything T and above, as being on this top line. We're talking about what's going on up here. But this center symbol is still where we're coming from, always from the center with that invisible kind of hashtag behind it. So I use unit if it's a thing, underlying if it's a theory or a thing, and then unanimous. It's also one past T. It's like moving out as a thing on its own. It's a unit. It's unanimous, or it's the underlying thing. And the sound of it is almost similar to an A, but how we did the once, tens, twents category, we have this shape of an A, this shape of a K at 11, and the U at 21. And a lot of times U and A make the same sound. Like if you say tug or you say they're the same sound. But if you spell TAG, it's tag. If you spell TUG, it's tug. Even though A sometimes make the sound. But you're usually doing more of an So you're shaping your mouth more that way when you make the U sound. And then when you say the letter U, you're using y, the outside of your mouth. So moving from U to V is just a simple movement. Instead of saying with that vowel sound, with the curvature of your mouth, you move into the outside of your lips. Now we come to V, which is 22. So we had T at the top line, 20. We have U, which is the rounded vowel that nurtures that idea as a underlying unanimous or unit. And we move one more from that. Remember, we're referring to the top line on here now. And it's vital. It's when your lips, you bite down in the center of your lip and go, v, and your mouth actually closes to make that sound. V. You don't do it with the open mouth. You can't go, you can't do it. You have to close the outside of your mouth. So V, I say vital because it's right in the very center. I mean, like, that's just a vital symbol. V. And when you use it to break down a word, you could say vital or based, base. But it makes much more sense to say vital. That's where that letter is used. And if it's not the right way to explain it, it's the best way I can figure out so far. So bear with me. So W, the 23rd letter, you could say based constant or based concept. But the symbol itself is two V's that we call a W. And The reason it is that way, of course, is because your mouth makes the shape of your lip coming down now, not like a V going, This one is, So you actually split the two sides of your lips with that shape. So that's why you have the W. And I use the idea of a vitally vital or dualistic thing because you're splitting your mouth in the center. And how we had 3 being C, 13 being M, now 23 is W. I mean, these things seem coincidental, but they're not. We wouldn't have carved these patterns out of space if they didn't hold a meaning. And I know what they mean, but can't say them good enough, it seems, to impress upon people that this actually makes sense. And when you use the words that I'm giving you for them, in the context that they're being used, because people are born and have dates of birth and all of those things come into play, and we wouldn't think they do, but life is happening and we talk about it and keep track. Once we start being honest, you can use the word to break things down and start seeing how things are pretty foul. I mean, you can look around and see how foul the world is. The letter 23 can be bad because our duality is what makes us think we're we instead of I. And that's where I'm coming from. I'm saying this to you knowing that inside you somewhere, this can make sense and should to a certain degree. Now, you hear some goon that you don't know saying, oh, the number 3 now turns to 13 at M. You know, I have 3, which is C, 13, which is M, and then 23, which is W. Those aren't, I mean, I know one is the E, but it's also 3, which happens to be a C. And that's where in that tense of the once tense, there's a different arrangement of movements because they're more subtle. When you get to the twins, it's to any, and they become more outwardly in theory. So, like I said, keep asking questions if you have them, and I'll just try to give you my best explanation, but I can't go deeper until I have specific questions. So please do, and don't mind it if I'm getting frustrated trying to find the words to say it, because as I show in the other videos, this does add up. But until we just start thinking consciously and acting responsibly, knowing a bunch of stuff isn't going to matter. We've got to do the simplest things and stop doing all the wrong things, you know? So 3 more to go and we'll finish up with XYZ. So now this one, since I've explained how I mean B as in being based back to the back of your throat, and I say D as in to and from, X might make more sense because it's at your base, to and from, when you go in the very back of your throat, where your tongue kind of clicks together, where it's meeting at all 4 spots in the back. So instead of D being D, N being N, X is in the back. So it's literally the center of your throat. X marks the spot, or, you know, X is the thing that you're looking for, or X is the thing you want to get rid of. And it's also based dia, or, you know, I want that gone, or I want that X. And we do use it for that symbol. So X isn't used all that much, but I just say center. It's what that idea is centered on, or what you want X'd out. And if you use it in one of those 2 methods or one of those 2 ways, it'll make sense. I hope we don't lose the light here, so I'll get through these last 2 pretty quick. Why? There's a lot you can say about why too, because we use it to vitally identify things. It's an I with a V on top. Or you can say yoke yonder. I say yoke yonder because if we were here, this is saying right in the center, and this is going zoop zoop like that. And that same shape is saying down like a funnel or up like that. And the shape of our mouth is yi or ya. So when I say yoke yonder or vitally identify, I say vitally identify more often. Because when we say, you know, for instance, how I've said this is L as things lie, or the active base of stuff, and then Y, that shape, where we all come together as one, or where we lift up to that. The idea of Yezu and Yeshua, there's a reason they start with a Y. And there's a reason we celebrate Christmas on 12/25, which is the as it lies active base, vitally identified, all one together. So these things aren't at all coincidental. It's just we've got to dig deeper and find that meaning in ourselves. I'm trying to show you what it means. But if a person goes, well, I get that, but it doesn't mean that to me, it doesn't necessarily nullify what I just said. It just means they don't get it. And all I'm trying to get people to do is care about the world we're in. And there are obvious things we would stop doing and it would make things better. And that's what we should be focusing our time on, not perpetuating the cycle more and more. So that's why 25, yoke yonder, or based expression, or base expressing. So one last letter. No, I don't have a certain word that I use for Z. I just say from one side to the other. And the reason I say that is obvious when you look at it, but it's starting from here, going all the way across, going down, and then going across again. So it's our tongue, just like the N sound being N, or the S sound being a more less intense S. Now we're going Z. So it's our tongue coming up and Z, the sound of like a lightning bolt. So from one side to the other, when we use it and we say zip, it's like from one side to the other, identified place. Zip over there, or zip that, these two things together, identified placement, you know? Or when you say zebra, it's literally from black to white, expressing the base reference active, and their body is black and white. I mean, they're loose ways, and you have to know what the things are that you're talking about. And in the world, we'll see those things. And with words, we cut patterns out of space to describe them. So Z, also being the 26th letter, you could say based familiar. From one side to the other, it's based familiar. It's from one side to the other, base form or base force, based. So we don't usually use Z for that many things, that when you use it and just think from one side to the other of some theory of some sort, color, placement. I mean, it's just contextual to a degree that we're not using words to just walk around saying nothing. We're not just going zzz, 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 zzz. Like when you sleep, you're from one side to the other. You're not awake. You're laying down. You're not active. You're resting. And you're not here. You're gone. So like the sign of 3 Z's on top of itself, when I say a letter, 2 letters next to each other, is that upon itself. When you have 3 letters, which never happens in a word, but sometimes in some acronyms, it'll be that. Or when we just say or Z. And when those things actually mean something. XXX, my center, your center, and somebody centered on it. Or the idea centered on it. 3 X's. Z, from one side to the other, upon itself, from one side to the other. 3 Z's. The manifestation, manifested, and the sound I make from it. Upon itself. And then what happens when I put it upon myself? I mean, I'm trying to make sense of simple things because this actually will make sense to the huge things. Once the simple things start coming to you and making more sense, why we're using those letters and symbols to explain them. So there are probably a lot more things that I can go over, but until they come up, we're speaking words. We're not going around telling everybody about letters, and I get that. I'm trying to be as open and honest as I can to get people to care about not only themselves, but animals, and think about what they're eating and what we're contributing to in the world, and just stopping bad habits. It may not be as exciting as life used to be at first, but then you start thinking to yourself, well, maybe I'm doing good by not wanting so much. So try to come from that spot and try to not necessarily save it, but save the world. Let it be for a little while. We're doing too much, and that needs to stop. So that's it for this video. Until next time, peace and God bless. I hope this helps. Thanks.